To our correspondent Hassan Saria, who's joining us from Cape Town in South Africa. As we mentioned earlier, millions of Iranians inside and outside the country are casting their ballots to choose the next president in the election runoff. Hassan, what's going on your side over there? Hassan, are you with us?
No, I couldn't hear them. Okay, so of course, voting is taking place at least 4 locations across South Africa. I'm of course talking to you from Cape Town, where voters came out in their numbers last week, and of course at the Iranian embassy in Pretoria, as well as at Iran.
All right, unfortunately, we've lost that connection as well, but hopefully we'll be hearing from our correspondent Hassan Saria in Cape Town later on in the program. We also have with us in our studio here in Tehran Mr. Reza Janvedadi, academic researcher and writer who's with us in Press TV studio headquarters in the Iranian capital. Mr. Vedadi, it's great to have you with us, sir. We were listening to the explanations, the detailed and expert explanations coming from a member of parliament, our esteemed guest, Mr. Ibrahim Azizi, about some of the requests of the country, some of the requirements from the next Iranian president. Of course, there's a sense of significance to this election, considering how it happened, considering the timing of it, with what's going on in the region. Share with us your views in this regard. We know it's an important time geopolitically in the world at the moment.
Thank you for having me and inviting me to your studio. I'm actually in Iran. I should have been in London to prepare some of the polling stations. I was part of the committee that was helping, part of the group that was helping to manage one of the polling stations in London. And it's very significant that you find that Iran, amongst a number of West Asian countries, is probably the only one who has democratic process, and it's being almost exported to these various countries. I think 250 locations around the world. And so you always have this discussion within the Western circles of describing Iran as a theocracy, as a dictatorship, you know, the typical Orientalist tropes, stereotypes used against Iran. However, what you see is a country that within the space of less than 2 months after the previous president was martyred or passed away, Iran has managed to organize new elections. In the same year where yesterday there was the UK elections, very important in that sense, this year we have elections in November in the United States. And so Iran falls within this new global geography of changing of nations and changing of powers, how the powers are shifting from the west towards the east. Iran, as you know, during the time of President Raisi, became member of the BRICS nations, which is overtaking in its economy the G7 countries of the West, and it's changing the not just the geography of economics, but the geography of military. There's always this discussion that Iran's economy is not as strong as, let's say, China or other countries. However, it's interesting that Iran, which has, because of the sanctions and various other issues, its economy may not be as strong as China. However, everything has to go through Iran when it comes to geopolitics in West Asian region and almost a lot of other parts of the world as well. And so I think the presidential elections in Iran is not just about Iran anymore. I think it's become one of those countries, as I mentioned, the UK and America and other countries. It's a global event in the sense that what happens in Iran resonates not just in West Asia, but we see a lot of the times in Western media and politicians saying that Iran is supporting Russia in, for example, Ukraine. Now that may be right or wrong. The Iranian Foreign Ministry has denied anything like that, but it's come to a point where the West keeps claiming that Iran has hands or has the ability to influence different situations around the world. And so that's something that Iranians themselves, whoever they vote for, either be for Dr. Jalili or for Dr. Pezeshkian. It doesn't matter who's voted for. Iran is significant in many ways. And so that's why I think it's important to direct that question towards, it depends who's voted in, definitely, but Iran will continue to have very important, significant influence in the world.
Thanks, Mr. Vedadi. We're going to go back to Member of Parliament Minister Ibrahim Azizi, and we're going to ask you to continue with your explanation about what are the expectations and the requisites that we have from the next president of Iran.
Let me that the correct, full, and timely implementation of the law and the pledge in continuation that has been foreseen in the 7th Development Plan. There is an important point, which is a very precise precision for the fair justice and distribution, which is the Gini coefficient. So it should be such that we would bring to zero, reduce to zero, the absolute poverty. And in that plan, it is zero and doesn't exist. The health insurance must cover everyone, 100%. A strong Iran is covered by the health insurance. There's an exceptionally important issue which the leader of the Islamic Revolution underlined in his remarks. What is it? It's that if someone becomes ill, the patient and their family would have no concern other than the illness itself. That means they should not have financial woes. And at most, in any illness that, God willing, wouldn't happen and befall anyone and any individual, and only and maximum 30% of their income would be affected, and 70% of it should be paid for by the administration and the funds that have been foreseen and considered for this. An exceptionally important issue is the maritime economy. We have this God-given blessing of seas, and there are very clear laws for a maritime-based economy that and has been foreseen in the present, and the president should be the flag bearer for this. The next issue that in the plan has been envisaged is the issue of transit, particularly railway transit, the north-south corridor, and there will be great measures here and moves. Besides what I said, there are also cultural issues, and they have been outlined in the law. The dear people of Iran are entitled and deserve all of the cultural, social, and economic rights. In the plan, we have foreseen the production of 20 good films and animations with the executive body in the Majlis, and it has been ratified that protection and safeguarding the Quran and those memorizing it, now whether at schools or mosques, and to facilitating marriage and consolidating that institution. In law, and most important of all, based on the general policies, the driving plans and
Mr.
initiatives.
Azizi, hold that thought. We're going to cross over, as promised earlier, to Press TV correspondent Isa Ali, who's joining us from the British capital, London, to talk to us about what's going on over there in the British capital. Isa, what's going on your side?
Well, I am here in central London and inside the Iranian consulate, where people have been coming all day to cast their votes in what is a historic occasion, of course, the election of the next president of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And we were here last week in the first round, and I have to say the turnout has been significantly higher this week. Many people coming. The number must be at least in the 500 or 600 number who have come here. And many people voting in other centres around London as well, at least 5 centres here and other parts of the UK as well. And many people, actually, we've seen the thuggish scenes of intimidation against people who have tried to cast their votes across the country and across the West and across the world. And many of those people who have come to vote have said, I didn't vote last week, but when I saw those scenes of people being intimidated and attacked in some cases, we saw hijabs being pulled off by supporters of the deposed regime and others, they said, I'm coming to vote. I'm coming to make sure that my voice is heard, not just to take part in the election, but to show people we won't be intimidated. So that's an interesting dynamic we've been seeing, that higher turnout. And of course, this is a face-off between Mr. Pezeshkian and Mr. Jalili. And so I think the importance of this election is starting to bear home on people, that this can really define the future of Iran. Very different visions. We've just seen an election yesterday in the UK where many people are saying the Labour government that is incoming is not very different to the outgoing Conservative government. But here you have in Iran 2 very stark choices with very different visions of the way forward for the country. And some arguing that that is democracy manifest. And so we've seen that effect here. Many people coming to cast their vote. We've been seeing, and it's very sad to say, people outside trying to intimidate people again, but there's been a better security presence. But from the opposition side, waving Israel flags, just showing where their loyalty lies. But many of the people coming in to cast their votes wearing kafirs or waving Palestine flags as well, to show their solidarity, of course, with the people of Gaza, and highlighting the role that Iran plays in that resistance axis as well. The polling booth here, the polling stations in the UK should be remaining open for another couple of hours, and we're expecting more and more people to attend and to cast their vote. It's a little bit quieter now as the lunchtime period has passed, but as the working hour in the UK finishes, we don't doubt that there will be many people coming to cast yet another or more votes in this election.
Thank you, Isa. Press TV's Isa Ali joining us from the British capital, London. We're going to come back to our guest, Member of Parliament, Mr. Ibrahim Azizi, who's joining us in our studio here in Tehran. Mr. Azizi, sorry to interrupt you there. Please pick up where you left off.
خدمت شما عرض شود همونطوری که عرض کردم این برنامه‌ای که در واقع
As I said, this plan, under the theme of progress alongside justice, which is law, and its demand of the Majlis and nation, of the president and executive branch, it's the implementation of the law. In this law, driving plans have been foreseen, which are themselves huge in terms of infrastructure, and they also activate other
یکی از
plans.
این موارد توسعه
One of
مکران
these
هست.
cases is the development of
بسیار حائز
Macron,
اهمیت هست
which is
برای
very
کشور.
significant for the country
ثروت عظیمی هست برای کشور.
and is a huge wealth for the country and has great capacity
تحول
for the country
عمومی
and
هست
nation.
که بسیار مؤثر هست. قطارهای سریع و سریع
And
هست
there are fast
و ترانزیت
trains
هست که عرض
and
کردم.
transit
پس بنابراین یک طرحهای عظیم
and
کشوران
they
در
are
قانون برنامه
huge
استناد
projects
بند نوع سیاست‌های کلی
based on the
طراحی
Article 9th of the plans has been
یکی از مهمترین
drafted and
مواردی که
devised.
در قانون پیش بینی شده و واقعاً مطالبه
One of
جدی
the
است
most important
و قانون
demands
اهم
and serious
هست،
demands
رفع
and
ناترازی هاست.
is to remove and eliminate inequality
ناترازی های انرژی،
and imbalance
ناترازی های
in
بودجه،
energy, in budget,
ناترازی های صندوق ها،
and in funds,
ناترازی های بانک ها،
and in banking.
رفع بشه.
All of these should
این
be
حق
eliminated.
مردمه.
This is the
اینا در
right of the
قانون پیش
people.
بینی شده.
These have been foreseen in the law.
بودجه‌ای که دولت تقدیم میکنه و در
The
مجلس
budget
تصویب
that
میشه،
the
که یک
administration
برشه
hands
یک
to the
ساله
parliament
از
and is
برنامه
ratified
5
there,
ساله
which
هست.
is a
ما
1-year
5 قدمی که
segment
باید
of the
برداریم،
5-year development
هر
plan. That
قدمش
means
در یک بودجه
the
یک
5
ساله
steps
برداشته
that we
میشه.
should take, every step is taken in one budget. There should be no
بودجه نباید کسری داشته باشه.
deficiency there.
باید طرح‌هایی که در بودجه میاد منابع اون
And
تامین بشه تا
the
ما به هدف
plans
برسیم.
outlined in the budget, their resources must be foreseen. Therefore, there should be no
یعنی کسری
imbalance
نباید
and no deficiency there.
چون وقتی کسری داشت مشکلات
Because
عدیده
when
دیگری به دنبال
there are
خواهد.
deficiencies, then it will have many other problems following it.
نکته بعدی ناترازی
The other
صندوق
issue
هاست.
is the imbalance of the funds.
داشته باشن.
The funds,
مردم
there should be no
از
imbalance
حقوق
there.
خودشون یه سهمی را به صندوق هر ماه
Every
اعطا میکنن.
month, the people deposit part of
به
their,
موقع
a share of their
از کارکنان
income
شاغلان
to the funds.
برداشته میشه.
And
حق مردم هست. حق این
so it's the
بازنشستگان
right of the
عزیز هست
pensioners
که اون مبالغی که خودشون واریز کردن
to
حالا که بازنشسته شدن
have the money that they have deposited themselves to make use of it.
صندوق‌ها
The funds
با کارهایی که انجام میدن این منابع را هدر بدن.
should not waste these resources with what they're doing.
باید مدیریت این منابع
The
مردم،
management of these
امانتداری از این
public
منابع مردم به نحو کاملی از
resources
صندوق‌ها صورت بپذیره.
should take place fully
بازنشسته‌ای که بعد
so
از
that
اینی
a
که
pensioner,
بازنشسته شد
and after being retired,
از این نعمت الهی که خودش سرمایه گذاری
would
کرده
be able to use this
برخوردار بشه.
and
نه اینکه
enjoy
با
this
مشکلاتی مواجه
blessing
پس
which he
سرمایه‌گذار
himself has invested.
اونها
So the
باید
management
باشه،
should be such
امانتداری کنه. اینا در
that
قانون پیش بینی شده.
the president
ناترازی
should be
بانک‌ها،
trustworthy and be entrusted with this. Imbalance in banking.
خارج از
Banks
قاعده انجام بده.
should not create and print money
حداقل کفایت
without
سرمایه بانک‌ها 8% پیش بینی شده.
the necessary requirements.
دقیق شاخص داره،
and
در
outside the
برنامه
law.
روشن شده.
These have all been stated and outlined.
نباید زیر مجموعه‌ای برای خودشون درست کنن،
Banks should not
بعد همینطوری خلق پول کنن،
create some
به زیر مجموعه خودشون
enterprises
پرداخت کنن
and spend money
و مشکلاتی را بر ملت تحمیل کنن.
and create problems for the nation.
در قانون. پس بنابراین
These have all been envisaged in the law.
باید در خط
Therefore, the
مقدم
president should be at the
خدمت
forefront
مردم و
of
پیشرفت
serving
کشور
the people and the progress of the country,
بانک‌ها را رفع کنه.
and as such
این
should
حق مردم
eliminate
هست.
that
این حق
imbalance.
عمومی است.
And this is the right of the people.
ناترازی انرژی
The imbalance in energy sector
باید رفع بشه.
should also be removed.
انرژی برای پیشرفت کشور و برای
Energy for the progress of the country and for the livelihood of the people
سلامت مردم فوق‌العاده
is
حاضر.
exceptionally important, as well as for the health of the people. There should be no imbalance there.
دقیقاً انرژی که مورد نیاز کشور هست در
The
قانون
energy that is
برنامه
required for the people has been
منابعش
foreseen in the 7th Development Plan, and the resources have been foreseen, so the President has to implement them and execute them. So people would have their right. And this country, just as in defense and in security, is at a height and at peaks at the summit, it would also be there in welfare and economy. The other issue is appreciation for the war veterans. And in families where women are the breadwinners, and for these families who are run by women, for their resources, there have been provisions in the law to safeguard their honor. The other issue, which is exceptionally important, is diplomacy. The dignity of the country, the expediency of the country, and national interests and public expediency should also be considered there. And the focus here should be on economy, meaning economic diplomacy. One of the rights and entitlements of the people is that the executive management, in every sense of the word, should see themselves as the servant of the people, and to see that as the greatest blessing for itself. This is a divine blessing, according to Imam Ali, peace be upon him. And all of the executive apparatuses should see themselves as the servant of the people. And there must be laws to facilitate the serving of the people. And whoever refers to any apparatus with respect and honor, their rights would be given. One of the best solutions is the electronic administration. We have seen in the law that 100% of the services should be in electronic administration, and the honor and pride of the nation should be observed. The youth should have jobs, and he shouldn't be made tired for a permit. The facilitation of permits has been ratified, and this should be implemented. And anyone with any capability should be able to demonstrate that. For the environment is the right of the people. There are very clear provisions for progress and maintaining the environment. 15 million tourists in tourism. The handicrafts sector, 1 million jobs have been foreseen there, and most important of all, for cyberspace and the digital space and economy in digital space for our youth, and to nurture them. And 500,000 people have been foreseen, and 20 million internet links, and 30 satellite and 30,000 science-based companies. All of these have been there in the plan. When we say it is in the plan, we mean it has been turned into law, and its resources have been provided and fulfilled.
Yes.
And the administration is at the forefront of executing these measures. For housing, which is one of the significant biggest concerns of the people, to have house in the plan is 7.5 years in the plan. and the land has been foreseen there. Therefore, the space is open for serving the people. 5 million houses have been envisaged there, 1.5 million urban and 1 million rural, and 500 houses to renovate. That means we had two goals here, both constructing houses and that inefficient spaces would be transformed. 15%. The other issue is automobiles. The dilapidated automobiles should go out of cycles, and hybrid and electric cars should be imported. In defense, we are at the peak. Its resources have been seen, but the incomes will increase multiple fold. And another issue for the underprivileged is the issue of employment. For the youth, the resources have been envisaged, but education has, for 6 million students who have graduated, an occupational skill or sports or arts talent, and to run classes there. And for sports, the great epics have been created there, and the resources have been fulfilled, and the grounds have been foreseen. For higher education, the 14th in the world has been foreseen, and science is great power and is wealth, and it has been foreseen that the graduates in higher education, that their thesis would be based on needs, and the ideas and needs would be, would be a correspondence between them, and so we would see progress alongside justice. We hope that the president, God willing, would use all of his efforts and all in his might to serve the people and the progress of the country and the dignity of Iran.
Thank you very much, Mr. Azizi, for a very informative explanation. We also have with us Mr. Reza John Vedadi, who's also joining us in our studios here in Tehran. Let's cross over to Mr. Vedadi. One aspect of all of this, the elections, the snap elections that were taking place, it's really worth focusing on is the campaigning, the competition between the candidates, the fairness that was implemented in the timing of their responses and debates and etc. I want you to compare the presidential debates to coincidentally what took place last week was the U.S. presidential debate. The fact that there's not a monopoly on parties or groups with respect to the Iranian debates and candidates. There were conservatives, there were reformists, there were independents. Break that down for us and our viewers, please.
Well, it's very interesting that you compared it to the United States. I live in the UK, so I would compare it to all three. In Iran, the competition, as you mentioned, was very varied. And as Isa Ali alluded to earlier, he mentioned there's a stark difference between who can be selected and who the people of Iran would like to lead them. If you look at the United States, there's no difference in their foreign policy. They were bickering about who supports the Zionist project most. About who supports the war in Ukraine the most. And in even domestic policy, it's about who will give the most tax breaks to the corporations and who will do those kind of things. In Iran, you saw a very stark difference between one candidate who's been linked to continuing the policies of President Raisi, and another candidate who is rightly or wrongly has members of the previous administration, Rouhani's cabinet members, and so he's been linked to that kind of policy, foreign policy, internal policy, domestic policy. So Iran genuinely has a different choice. In the UK, you had the Tories, the Conservative, who for the last 15 years have decimated the National Health Service, the education sector. They've really destroyed the economy of the UK. And then you have a Labour Party who, on foreign policy, exactly the same regarding Ukraine, Israel, and all the other major policies. And when it came to internal policy, it was not very clear what the Labour Party, who won 400 plus seats, are actually going to provide. Are they going to renationalize, for example, electricity, gas, railway, which will make a genuine difference to the economy? So we have to see how that turns out. But I don't have a hope for the US. I don't have a hope for UK elections. But I do have hope for Iran. And I pray that they choose the president who will lead Iran into, continue to lead them into economic development and into foreign policy development and into infrastructural development.
Right, Mr. Vedadi, stay with us. I want to thank our esteemed guest, Member of Parliament, head of the Parliament's Commission overseeing the 7th five-year development program, Mr. Ibrahim Azizi. Thank you, sir, for sharing your thoughts with us here on Press TV, and thank you for all the detailed information that you shared with us and our viewers.
Yes, I hope that the best fate is a wait for the people of Iran, and the strong Iran and the nation is shaped for them, and this will certainly happen. And great tidings here, and that the plan for the progress alongside Justice for the Country is already ready, and any of the country which is chosen, the roadmap and the funds for it has already been foreseen, and this is already prepared. And so Iran, the Iran will be placed at the summit, and the Iranians will benefit and enjoy sincere serving. I hope that the elite, the youths, the hopes for the future would be able to use this divine blessing, which is their right.
Thank you very much. Back to Mr. Vedadi, who's in our studios here. Mr. Vedadi, how does Iran's democratic model, in your opinion, stand out in the region, specifically in the Persian Gulf region?
That's a very interesting question. And during the Hajj season, which was just very recently, this is a very good example of how Iran's democracy, Iran's ability to enable citizens to participate in the process of elections scares, I would say, to the point of a very strong degree, the Persian Gulf monarchies. They were supposed to have, so Iran requested from Saudi Arabia to enable Iranian citizens during the Hajj season to be able to participate in the elections. Saudi Arabia, obviously was resisting, and eventually they accepted, only on the conditions that there's no marketing, there's no advertisement that there's elections. It only gets conducted within the hotels where the Iranian pilgrims are, and no one knows about it. And so I'm not sure if the elections did take place in Saudi Arabia, but this exemplifies how these countries, all these Persian Gulf countries, do not have any elections. I think maybe Bahrain has some parliamentary elections, but the rest of them do not enable their citizens to participate in selecting members of parliament, selecting the leadership, or any of the main infrastructures. I also compare it not just to the West Asian region, but I would compare it to the United Kingdom. In the United Kingdom, which is, they call it the mother of democracy, in the parliament of mother of democracy and so forth. In the UK, we have one election. In that one election, you have to choose your member of parliament, the direction of the country, and the leader of the country that will lead United Kingdom. This is a very difficult situation where you have one choice to either make a good choice or a very bad choice, or a mixture of good and bad choices, because your member of parliament may be suitable for you, but the leader that they follow is not suitable. Iran enables the citizens to vote for the members of parliament separately. They elect the president separately, and they elect the assembly of experts that elects the leader of the revolution. So you have Iranians' ability to participate in all of the spectrums and all of the important leadership positions in the country. And so if people participate and if the turnout is low, which I hope it's not, they're genuinely missing out in the whole democratic process. There may be genuine grievances about what's happened in the last 10 years with economy and a price of, with all different kind of pressures that exist on them. But without voting, there will be no change. And there's a stark difference, as I said earlier, and Isa Ali said earlier, stark difference between who they can elect and what kind of changes they'll have. So that's something very important for Iranians to know. And I think for Iranians who live outside of Iran, to speak to non-Iranians and explain to them, stop listening to CNN, stop listening to BBC and all of these legacy media. They don't portray Iran in an accurate, nuance, and fair way. Pick up, watch Press TV, watch other news, look at Press TV website and other various news outlets in English to understand what goes on in the East and specifically Iran.
Right, and what's when we're in line with what you were just saying about the significance of the elections, when we're in relation to regional countries in the Persian Gulf, why do so many Western countries try to downplay the Iranian elections then?
Well, this goes back to 100 years of Orientalist view of the East. And Iran, ever since the revolution, which changed the dynamics of West Asian politics and the world, enabled a country like Iran not just to be a cash cow that Donald Trump referred to Saudi Arabia. Iran became a country that already had 2,500 years of civilization and history and science, philosophy and knowledge, but became a country that actually now could export ideas to the world. And I think the Islamic revolution that took place, the Iranian revolution, unfortunately hasn't fully been grasped by Iranians and people outside of Iran. If they truly understand the message that Imam Khomeini and Ayatollah Khamenei, or the leaders of the revolution, have expressed over issues that are affecting the world, you can see, you see this after many years, it being chanted. You see Americans, young people, demonstrating against Israel, shouting death to the government that is bringing so much suffering to the world. So all of these things that Imam Khomeini and Ayatollah Khamenei have been repeating for the last 45 years, people are now coming to terms and understanding, oh, this is what they were referring to. But I think it's us as Iranian citizens haven't invested enough time to understand it fully what the Iranian revolution was and how best to explain it. It's not about jihad, it's not about exporting violence, it's exporting ideas of fighting against oppression, injustice, and enabling the people of those citizens of those countries, as you see in Ansarullah in Yemen and Iraq and other countries, taking control of their own country and their own destiny, be it whichever direction they want to go, instead of being a puppet to the West and America and all of these countries that have been interfering in these parts of the world for the past 150 years.
Right, so Iranians have headed to the polls in the runoff presidential election a week after none of the candidates could secure the majority of votes in the snap election. Polling stations opened at 8 a.m. local time. These are live images that we're getting from cities across Iran as people are queuing up at the polling stations. The vote was scheduled to close at 6 p.m., but the Interior Ministry just a while ago announced a 2-hour extension to the voting time of Iran's presidential runoff. That means an extension to 8 p.m. local time. It's 7:10 p.m. here in the Iranian capital, Tehran. Of course, it's expected that voting hours will be extended once again. Also joining us now in our studio here at Press TV headquarters, we have lawyer and political analyst Mr. Ahmad Qadiri. Mr. Qadiri, it's great to have you with us, sir. As we start off, customary with all our guests and analysts here, is talking about the significance, in your opinion and your perspective, of this election, considering how it happened and why it happened, considering the timing of with what's going on in the region. Share with us your views in that regard, specifically how an important time it is geopolitically in the world.
In the name of God, greetings to you and your esteemed viewers. As you know, today is the second round of the presidential election in Iran, and because the administration of Marta Raisi was left incomplete because of the accident that happened to him. And instead of 4 years, it ended in 3. We held snap elections. And in the first round, 6 candidates competed against one another. And based on the constitution, since none of the candidates won 50% of the votes, the election went to the second round with the presence of the 2 frontrunners. And right now, the contest is between Dr. Masoud Pezeshkian, which is a professional parliamentarian, and for several rounds he has been representative of the city of Tabriz, and his highest position has been the deputy speaker for Majlis and the being Minister of Health during the reformist era. And on the other side, we are seeing Dr. Saeed Jalili, whose highest rank and position has been the Secretary of the National Supreme Security Council, which was responsible for the nuclear talks at one time. The election began from 8 a.m. and will continue until 10 p.m. or if needed until 12 midnight, and eventually whoever wins most of the votes will become the new president. This was a general outline of the presidential election and what we have ahead of us. The first issue, specifically about your question, is to know that this is a very tight and unpredictable contest, and both candidates and their campaigns are counting on every single one of the votes of the people, and the elections are absolutely and by no means predictable. This tight neck-and-neck race and unpredictable contest, and this vibrancy, enthusiasm that exists between the 2 candidates and their supporters, shows how important elections are in Iran, and competitive and real. Naturally, both candidates, given their political background and the framework of the constitution, are defined within the government of Iran, and the choice of any of these 2 will lead to no macro change and outside the framework within the Islamic Republic of Iran's foreign policy, because the framework of Iran's foreign policy is clear in the constitution, and Article 110 of the constitution clearly states that and stipulates that the establishment's general policies, including foreign policy, is determined by the leader of the Islamic Revolution. Therefore, the differences between the 2 candidates is in the realm of diplomacy and the priorities of foreign policy and tactics. I saw that some foreign media stated that and declared that if Mr. Pezeshkian becomes the new president, the Islamic Republic of Iran will turn away from East, meaning Russia and China, and move toward the West and pivot towards the West. Such analysis are a result of lack of familiarity with Iran's foreign policy and the constitution's framework. Yes, priorities between the West and East might differ between the two presidential candidates, but it's neither the demands of any of the two candidates to sever ties with one side of the world and establishing ties with the other, and the structure of the country do not allow that sudden change either, and unreasonable one, particularly that after the Ukraine war, the convergence of Iran and Russia and trade ties between the two countries and agreements between them has increased exponentially and has reached a point of no return.
Sure, let's bring in political analyst Shabir Rizvi, who's joining us from the British capital, London. Mr. Rizvi, welcome to the program. I want to get your perspective, as we do with all of our guests and panelists joining us here on our extended coverage of the runoff round of the snap presidential election in Iran, about the significance of this election and the timing of it, and taking into consideration what's going on in the region and how important time geopolitically we are in the world.
Hello, good afternoon or good evening. Thank you very much for the invitation. Of course, the election, as your previous commentators have quite eloquently put forward, is that it is significant, it is important, it shows the maturity and the vibrancy of the democratic process in the Islamic Republic of Iran. Just as a reminder, as I'm sure you're all, your esteemed viewers are well aware, that we've had an election here in the UK as well. And the turnout in this particular election was the second lowest in recorded history since 1855. So that really shows you some interesting things that are taking place as far as low turnout, even in the United Kingdom, is concerned. And the party that has won the election in the UK, the Labour Party, only got 34% of the votes, whilst it got 64% of the parliamentary seats. So you can see how undemocratic or skewed our own democratic process in UK is, that a party that gets only 34% of the votes ends up getting 64% of the seats and becomes the ruling party for the next 5 years. And this is the story all the way around in Europe, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and America, where the winning party or the winning leader has less than 40% of the votes. So really, it's the minority that often rules in the Western democracies, if we look at it that way. So clearly, what Iran has shown to the world, that it has a democratic process. The democratic process may be different than other countries, but the process is the same, that people cast their votes in favor of an individual they would like to be their president or member of parliament or mayor or any other elections that take place in the Islamic Republic of Iran. And of course, as you've pointed out, that both the candidates who went forward in this second round of the presidential elections have had debates. People have had an opportunity of listening to them. And then, of course, you see what kind of debates take place in the USA between Biden and Trump. Someone dubbed that debate as dumb and dumber, if you like. There was no sort of intellectual debate. There was no sort of philosophy of what they were trying to put forward. It was absolutely a juvenile kind of debate that took place. So at least the political debates that take place in Iran, Islamic Republic of Iran, are mature and, of course, concerning policy itself. So that's a huge difference between what happens in the Islamic Republic of Iran. Of course, as other commentators have pointed out in these discussions today, is that considering West Asia, Iran is the only democracy. The Zionist entity claims it to be the only democracy in West Asia, but in reality is that democracy is an apartheid. It's an ethno sort of racist regime, which sort of gives the best opportunities to the Jewish entity, the Zionists living in that part of West Asia. But whilst in the Islamic Republic of Iran, everyone has a vote, and they really decide the destiny of their nation. So you can't have a better model. And that's the reason why the Western media, since the snap election was called, have been decrying, saying that there's apathy, people are not participating in the elections. And of course, look, apathy is one of the factors which is all over the world. So it's not particularly unique or particular factor that is applicable in Iran. There are many people who do not turn up to vote for multiple reasons. But that's not because, as the leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, has said, it's not because people are disenchanted with the Islamic Revolution and the method that it has followed since the inception of the Islamic Revolution in 1979. So it's not disenchantment, but the reality is that for multiple reasons, people don't go and cast their vote. So it's not to in any way decry the democratic process, which over the years has matured. And of course, the maturity of the democratic process is that many of the former presidents still live in the Islamic Republic of Iran, whilst in many of the countries, as you well know, in West Asia and other parts of the world, that former presidents are either assassinated or they leave their country and go and start living in London, Paris, or USA. So that again is another factor to look at, that how mature the democracy in the Islamic Republic of Iran is. So these are the things that really make the Western analysts and the elite in the West upset with the Islamic Republic of Iran, that it continues to hold elections irrespective of what's happening internally. As you all know very well, that even during the 8-year war that was imposed on Iran by Saddam and Iraq, at that time, Iran continued to hold presidential elections and other elections. So again, many factors that if you try to analyze and put it against what's happening in Western democracies, then Iran is actually doing very well as a democratic state. And it will continue to sort of go in that direction, because it's not a dictatorship, it's not a sort of an elite that is being imposed by either the commercial interest or corporate finance or any of the diktats coming out of Washington, London, or Paris, because quite often we see that even when there is a democratic process, there's huge interference from Western countries to manipulate the result of the elections, whilst in Iran, it's totally independent, free of interference from Western nations. Of course, they try to manipulate by beaming in 200 odd channels in Farsi to sort of deviate the ordinary unenlightened Iranians who think that the glamour of the West is really something that they should be aspiring to. Some of them may get deviated from the line of the Islamic Revolution of Iran. But nonetheless, I think majority of the Iranians are quite mature, and they understand and cherish their independence very much since the advent of the Islamic Revolution of Iran. And they remember how it was prior, during the Reza Shah Pahlavi's period, when Iran wasn't able to do anything unless what Washington, London, and Paris wanted Iran to do.
Stay with us, Mr. Rizvi. That's exactly the area I was going next with our guest, Mr. Qadiri, who's in our studio here in Tehran. Mr. Qadiri, what's your reaction to the much of the anti-Iran media outlets and mainstream-driven media and trying to undermine the elections in Iran, and every time for that matter? They're trying to conjure a narrative of ineffectiveness to an individual's vote. Why is that the case? What's the motivation behind it, and who benefits from it?
As a political monitor, I should say that the West entering the fray of Iran's election has been twofold and in two aspects. The covert aspect is the same thing that you just pointed out. That means what is known in the media within the framework of propaganda. They say that the turnout has been low and lackadaisical and being ineffective and such. But another dimension of the Western interference we've seen so far, based on the cyber interventions and influencing through cyberspace. For example, when you watch Instagram's Explore, you see that there's an unprecedented data about one of these two candidates, which I won't mention, but these posts are actually eliminated and removed from those pages. And the posts about the other candidate, which I will not name again, is constantly seen in the Explore segment of Instagram and to be shown to the audience. This is just a small example of the efforts by the West to influence the election in Iran. We have not forgotten that Hillary Clinton, the US Secretary of State during the Obama tenure, during the 1388 election, which in the former election, when there was some differences between the two candidates and we saw some crowds and some quarrels, Hillary Clinton said that Twitter tried to stop her operations, but we asked Twitter that it would delay these repairs and maintenance so that they would be able to affect and create tensions in Iran's political arena. So we see the influence of the West in two segments, which is the general media, and one is the social media, and particularly Instagram, which in a palpable way they want to manage the beliefs of the Iranians. Now, whether to dissuade them completely from participating in the election or to push them towards a particular candidate. Of course, there's another dimension to this, which, based on the previous two rounds in 1388, to create tensions after the elections. And we have to see what the result of the election will be. or whether foreign embassies backed by foreign media, whether they will play that card as well and advance or activate this project as well.
Right. Let's go back to Mr. Rizvi in London. Let's talk about the legacy that the late Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi has left behind. In terms of foreign policy, there are two major aspects that are considered to be the highlights of on the agenda of the foreign policy of the late Iranian president. One would be his look to the East concept, which we saw materializing with Iran joining the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, Iran joining BRICS, and etc. The other, of course, would be the issue of the support for the Palestinian cause and bringing a focus to the Israeli genocide and massacre that's taking place in Gaza. I'm going to discuss the issue of the look to the East with you, Mr. Rizvi, and the issue of de-dollarization was one of the main topics that was circulating yesterday's SCO heads a summit that took place in the Kazakh capital, Astana. How much of an important component is Iran in this issue of a multipolar world order, the new geopolitical structure that we're seeing, and in terms of the direction that most of the East and the so-called global South is taking in the concept of de-dollarization in the international global market?
Yes, there are lots of things to unpick from your question. I would sort of start firstly that not only is Iran important in the whole sort of SCO, the BRIC countries, and the relationship between Iran, China, and Russia, it's actually quite pivotal at multiple levels. First, obviously, the geographic position that Iran enjoys, that part of it is towards China, part of it is Russia, and on the other hand, you've got a multitude of Arab nations, and then you've got Pakistan, Afghanistan, and India on the other side, and a huge sea coast south of Iran. So geographically, it's in a unique position. Secondly, of course, since the advent of the Islamic Revolution in Iran, Iran has taken an independent line really to fight against the Washington hegemonic power and also to support all the oppressed nations and people of the world, whether it is the Palestinians or in South America. That's one of the reasons why Iran has continued to develop relationships with nations and people that have been oppressed by imperialism and colonialism.
Mr. Rizvi, sorry, hold that thought. I'm going to have to jump in there. We're going to go live to the Iranian capital, Tehran, where head of Iran's election commission is issuing a statement regarding the election, the runoff presidential election. Let's listen in.